The road that helped build the American dream is not a single strip of asphalt, but a living ribbon of hope, memory, and movement. It is the old two-lane highway that cuts through the heart of the country, from the shores of Lake Michigan to the beaches of the Pacific. It is the road that carried farmers fleeing dust, soldiers returning from war, families chasing work, and dreamers seeking a fresh start. This road, once called the Main Street of America, is Route 66. But to understand how it helped build the American dream, we have to go back to a time when the dream itself was still being shaped, a time when the country was wide open and the future was a promise written on a road map. Imagine the year 1926. America is booming. Cars are no longer toys for the rich. They are becoming tools for the ordinary man. Henry Ford's Model T has put the nation on wheels, and people are discovering a new kind of freedom. But the roads they drive on are a patchwork of mud, gravel, and broken sections of concrete. There is no national system, no clear way to drive from one coast to the other. If you wanted to go from Chicago to Los Angeles, you would have to string together a dozen different state highways, many of them little more than wagon trails. And that is exactly what a group of businessmen and visionaries set out to change. They wanted a single, continuous highway that would link the industrial Midwest to the golden opportunities of the West. They called it US 66. The numbers themselves carry a kind of poetry. In the federal highway numbering system, even numbers run east to west, and the number 66 was chosen because it sounded smooth, easy, and memorable. But the real magic was in the route. Unlike other highways that followed rigid lines, Route 66 was designed to snake through towns and villages, connecting main streets instead of bypassing them. That was no accident. The men who planned this road understood that a highway is not just a way to get from one place to another. It is a way to bring life to the places in between. And so Route 66 became a lifeline for hundreds of small communities, from the red dirt of Oklahoma to the high desert of Arizona. It was a road built for the people who lived along it, and for the people who would come to pass through it. But the road that helped build the American dream did not become famous because of its engineering. It became famous because of the stories it carried. In the 193s, as the Great Depression tightened its grip, that road became a path of survival. The Dust Bowl had turned the Great Plains into a wasteland. Farmers watched their topsoil blow away in dark clouds that blotted out the sun. Their crops died, their livestock starved, and their mortgages came due. There was nothing left for them in the places they had called home for generations. So they packed their belongings into whatever vehicles they had, jalopies, trucks, even horse-drawn wagons, and they pointed their grills west. They headed down Route 66. John Steinbeck called it the Mother Road, and he wrote about it in The Grapes of Wrath. He described the families who fled Oklahoma and Texas, their cars loaded with mattresses, pots, and children. They drove along that two-lane highway with hope clenched in their fists. They did not know what awaited them in California, but they knew they could not stay. Route 66 was their only choice. It was the road that promised a chance to start over, and for many, it delivered on that promise. They found work in the fields, in the factories, in the shipyards. They built new lives in the land of oranges and sunshine. The road did not just move them, it transformed them. It turned desperate refugees into pioneers of a new American identity. That migration changed the country. The people who traveled Route 66 during the Dust Bowl years brought with them their music, their food, their faith, and their resilience. They helped create the culture of the West Coast, from the honky-tonk sound of Bakersfield to the barbecue pits of Los Angeles, and the road itself became a symbol of that transformation. It was the thread that stitched the nation together, the blacktop that proved mobility was not just a luxury but a birthright. The American dream had always been about opportunity, but before Route 66, opportunity was often locked in place. You were born in a town, you lived in that town, and you died in that town. The road changed that. It said you could leave, you could go somewhere else and become someone else. That idea was revolutionary. World War II brought new meaning to Route 66. The road became a critical military and industrial artery. Tanks, trucks, and troops rolled along its length. Defense plants in California and the Southwest depended on the steady flow of raw materials and finished goods that moved along that highway. After the war, the soldiers came home. They had seen the world, and they wanted to see more of their own country. The automobile industry was booming again, and families were eager to hit the open road. Route 66 was at the center of that spirit. It was not just a route anymore. It was a destination in itself. Billboards advertised motels shaped like teepees, gas stations with neon signs, and diners that served the best pie in the world. The road became a playground for the middle class. In the 1950s and 1960s, the American dream was often defined by a house in the suburbs, a car in the driveway, and a vacation that took the family somewhere new every summer. Route 66 was the perfect backdrop for that dream. You could drive with the windows down, the radio playing, and the wind in your hair. You could stop at a roadside attraction and see a live rattlesnake or a giant rock shaped like a dinosaur. You could eat a hamburger at a place called the Cozy Dog Drive-In, where the owner claimed to have invented the corn dog. You could sleep at a motor court where the rooms were clean and the rates were cheap. Every mile brought a new experience, a new story, a new piece of the American mosaic. But the road that helped build the American dream also reflected the dream's flaws. Route 66 ran through the heart of a segregated nation. For African Americans, the open road was not always open. There were towns where a black family could not find a hotel room or a restaurant that would serve them. There were gas stations that would not let them use the restroom. Traveling Route 66 required a different kind of courage. Families carried their own food and sometimes slept in their cars. They relied on a network of safe places, often listed in a guide called the Negro Motorist Green Book. The road was a promise of freedom, but the promise was not kept for everyone. That tension, that struggle, is part of the road story too. The American dream was and is a work in progress. Route 66 shows us both the beauty and the brokenness of that journey. The 1970s brought change. The interstate highway system, championed by President Dwight Eisenhower, was a vast network of four-lane divided highways that bypassed the old two-lane roads. It was faster, safer, and more efficient, but it also drained the life out of Route 66. Towns that had depended on the steady stream of travelers saw their businesses wither. Motels closed. Gas stations became ghostly shells. The neon signs dimmed. Route 66 was officially decommissioned in 1985, removed from the U.S. highway system. Many sections were paved over or abandoned. It seemed the road that helped build the American dream had become a relic, a footnote in the history of transportation. But something remarkable happened. People remembered. They remembered the road that carried their parents and grandparents across the country. They remembered the roadside diners, the quirky museums, the friendly strangers. Historians, preservationists, and ordinary enthusiasts began to fight for the road's legacy. They formed associations, organized events, and pushed for the protection of the remaining sections. In 1999, the Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program was established. States began to mark old alignments with special signs. The road was no longer a functional highway, but it became a living museum. It became a symbol of nostalgia, of the spirit of adventure, of the idea that the journey matters as much as the destination. Today, people from all over the world come to drive the surviving stretches of Route 66. They come from Japan, Germany, Australia, and Brazil. They come because they have heard the stories, seen the movies, or read the books. They come because they want to feel what it was like to travel through America when the country seemed younger and the possibilities seemed endless. They want to stand at the Cadillac Ranch in Texas, where 10 Cadillacs are buried nose down in a field. They want to eat at the Big Texan Steak Ranch in Amarillo, where a 72-ounce steak is free if you can finish it in an hour. They want to see the Painted Desert and the Petrified Forest, the Grand Canyon and the Mojave Desert. They want to drive the old road, the road that winds through small towns where the pace of life is slower and the welcome is genuine. But the road that helped build the American dream is more than a tourist attraction. It is a reminder of who we are as a people. We are a nation of movers, of people who leave one place to try another. We are people who believe that the future is not fixed, that we can shape it with our own hands and our own wheels. Route 66 embodies that belief. It was built by dreamers, traveled by seekers, and preserved by those who refuse to let the past fade into silence. The road itself may be broken in places. Sections are paved over by interstates or reclaimed by the desert, but its spirit endures. It endures in the stories of the families who drove it, in the songs that celebrate it, and in the hearts of everyone who has ever felt the pull of the open road. One of those stories belongs to a man named Bob Waldmeyer. Bob was an artist, a wanderer, and a devoted fan of Route 66. He drove the road in a Volkswagen van painted with intricate designs. He drew maps and postcards that captured every detail of the journey. He met the owners of diners and motels, listened to their tales, and shared them with anyone who would listen. Bob believed that the road was a living thing, a creature that breathed with the rhythm of the travelers who passed along it. He said that Route 66 was not a road at all, but a state of mind. That state of mind is the American dream, the conviction that you can go west or east or anywhere and find what you are looking for. But the dream is not just about moving, it is about building. Every town along Route 66 was built by someone who took a risk. The diner owner who learned to make the perfect milkshake, the gas station attendant who fixed a flat tire at midnight, the motel keeper who stayed up to welcome a tired family. These were ordinary people doing extraordinary things. They were part of the road, and the road was part of them. Together, they created a network of hope that spanned 2,448 miles. That network helped shape the American economy, the American culture, and the American identity. Now, we need to talk about the road in a new way. We need to understand that the American dream is not a fixed destination. It is a journey, and the road is still being built. The old sections of Route 66 are still there, but the spirit of the road lives on in every highway, every back road, every dirt track that someone takes to find a better life. The road that helped build the American dream is not just a historical artifact. It is a living idea. It calls to us still, inviting us to pack our bags, fill up the tank, and drive. It tells us that the horizon is not a limit, but a beginning. It reminds us that the dream is not something you find. It is something you make mile by mile with every turn of the wheel. And so we begin our journey. We will travel the old road together, from the shores of Lake Michigan to the edge of the Pacific. We will meet the people who built it, the people who traveled it, and the people who keep its memory alive. We will explore the moments of triumph and tragedy that define the road. We will ask what the American dream means today and how the road that helped build it can still guide us. This is the story of Route 66. This is the story of the road that helped build the American dream, and this is where it all begins. And so we begin our journey, but before we head west from Chicago, we need to understand the people who made this road their lifeline. Among them were the migrants of the Dust Bowl, families fleeing the parched fields of Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas in the 193s. They packed their belongings into rickety trucks and old sedans, their mattresses tied to the roof, their children pressed against the windows. Route 66 became their artery to California, a promised land where they hoped to find work picking cotton or fruit. John Steinbeck called it the Mother Road, the highway of escape. He wrote about the Jodes in The Grapes of Wrath, and that novel gave Route 66 a mythic dimension. The Jodes were fictional, but their story was real. Thousands of families drove this road with nothing but hope and desperation. They stopped at camps along the way, some set up by the government, others by charity groups. They ate beans from a can and slept on the ground. They fixed their own tires and patched their own radiators. The road was brutal, but it was also a promise. It said that if you kept moving, you might find a new beginning. The Dust Bowl migration reshaped the American West and Route 66 forever. The road that had been built for commerce and tourism became a route of survival. It carried the weight of a nation in crisis, and the people who traveled it were not just statistics. They were mothers, fathers, grandparents, and children. They carried with them their faith, their music, their recipes, and their stories. They built new communities in California, but they never forgot the road that brought them there. Years later, they would tell their grandchildren about the long drive across the desert, the kindness of strangers who shared water, the moment they first saw the Pacific Ocean. Route 66 was not just asphalt and concrete. It was a thread that connected broken pieces into a new pattern. But the road also carried a darker cargo. During the Great Depression, Route 66 was a magnet for transients and hobos who rode the rails and hitched rides. Not everyone was welcome. Towns along the road sometimes formed vigilante groups to keep out migrants. The road was a dream for some, a nightmare for others, and yet the dream persisted. The American dream of the 193s and 40s was often measured in square feet of farmland or a steady paycheck. Route 66 offered a path to that dream, even if the path was rutted and dusty. After World War II, the road transformed again. The soldiers came home, got married, bought houses, and started families. They also bought cars. The automobile became a symbol of freedom and prosperity. Route 66 was perfectly positioned to cater to the new American family on vacation. The roadside architecture bloomed. Diners shaped like giant coffee pots, motels with neon signs shaped like cowboys or teepees, gas stations with gleaming pumps and clean restrooms. This was the golden age of the road, the 195s and early 196s. It was a time when you could drive from Chicago to Los Angeles without ever leaving the two-lane blacktop. You could stop at the Wigwam Motel in Hallbrook, Arizona, and sleep in a concrete teepee. You could buy a frozen custard at Ted Drew's in St. Louis. You could see the world's largest rocking chair or the world's largest collection of barbed wire. The road was a carnival, a museum, a feast. And it was also a stage for the civil rights movement. The Green Book we mentioned earlier was not just a guide, it was a survival manual. Victor Hugo Green, a postal worker from Harlem, published the first edition in 1936. He listed hotels, restaurants, and gas stations that welcomed black travelers. Along Route 66, these safe havens were rare but precious. In Tulsa, the Buck 66 Motel was one. In Amarillo, the Townhouse Motor Hotel. In Albuquerque, the El Vado Motel, though it was originally segregated, eventually began to accept all guests. Every safe place was a small victory. Every mile driven was an act of defiance. The Green Book was a guide to dignity. It told black families where they could stop without fear of humiliation or violence. It was a map of hope in a landscape of exclusion. One of the most famous Green Book sites on Route 66 was the Aragon Hotel in St. Louis. It stood near the intersection of Market and Jefferson, a modest building with a sign that read colored only. Inside, the rooms were clean and the owners were welcoming. Travelers would share stories, exchange information about the road ahead, and rest before continuing west. The Aragon is gone now, demolished years ago, but its memory lives on in the accounts of those who stayed there. They remember the kindness of the proprietors, the smell of fried chicken from a nearby kitchen, the sound of blues music drifting from a radio. That was the road too, not just the neon and the billboards, but the quiet moments of solidarity. The Green Book faded after the Civil Rights Act of 1964 made segregation illegal in public accommodations, but the scars remained. Even today, some older African Americans recall the road with a mixture of nostalgia and pain. They remember the freedom of the open road and the weight of the restrictions. They remember the joy of a family road trip and the anxiety of finding a place to sleep. Route 66, like the American dream, was never simple. It was a tapestry woven with threads of joy and sorrow, triumph and defeat. As we continue our journey, we come to the middle of the road, the midpoint between Chicago and Los Angeles. That point is near the town of Shamrock, Texas, or some say Adrian, Texas. At the Midpoint Cafe in Adrian, you can stand exactly 1,139 miles from each end. The cafe is a time capsule. The decor is retro, the menu is simple, and the pie is homemade. The owner in recent years was a woman named Fran Hauser, who bought the cafe in 1990 and kept the spirit of the road alive. She served chicken fried steak, mashed potatoes, and sweet tea. She told stories of the travelers who passed through, some from as far away as New Zealand. She said that the road brought people together in a way that nothing else could. At the Midpoint Cafe, strangers become friends over a slice of pecan pie. That is the magic of Route 66. It is a place where you can pause, take a breath, and realize that you are exactly halfway to your dream. Further west in Tucumcari, New Mexico, the Blue Swallow Motel still welcomes guests. Its neon sign features a blue swallow with outstretched wings. The motel was built in the 193's rows and has been lovingly restored. The rooms have tiled bathrooms and vintage furniture. The owners greet you by name. They ask where you are going and where you have been. They share tips about the road ahead. The Blue Swallow is more than a place to sleep. It is a community. Travelers leave notes, swap photos, and form temporary bonds. The road creates its own kind of family, and the family includes everyone who has ever driven this stretch of asphalt, from the Dust Bowl migrants to the Japanese tourists with their cameras. We cannot forget the service stations. They were the lifeblood of the road. At a station in McLean, Texas, the Phillips 66 gas station sold gasoline and ice-cold bottles of soda. The attendant would check your oil, clean your windshield, and give you directions. He might tell you about a good place to eat up the road or warn you about a sharp curve ahead. These attendants were the gatekeepers of the journey. They knew the road intimately. They could tell you which towns had the best pie and which had the worst roads. They were part of the network of care that made long-distance travel possible. The road also inspired music. In 1946, songwriter Bobby Troup wrote the song Get Your Kicks on Route 66. It was recorded by Nat King Cole and later by dozens of artists, from Chuck Berry to the Rolling Stones. The song turned the highway into a cultural icon. It listed the towns along the way: St. Louis, Joplin, Oklahoma City, Amarillo, Gallup, Flagstaff, Winona, Kingman, Barstow, and San Bernardino. The song was a travelogue set to music. It captured the rhythm of the road, the excitement of the journey, the promise of the West. When you heard that song, you wanted to pack your bags and go. You wanted to see the painted desert and the petrified forest. You wanted to feel the wind in your hair and the sun on your face. But the interstate system changed everything. President Eisenhower had seen the German Autobahns during World War II and understood the value of a national highway network for defense and commerce. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 authorized the construction of 41,000 miles of interstate highways. These roads were wide, straight, and fast. They bypassed the small towns that depended on Route 66. travelers no longer needed to stop in Amarillo or Gallup. They could zoom past on a divided highway, eating at chain restaurants and sleeping at chain motels. The old road became a ghost. Stations closed, motels boarded up, diners locked their doors. The neon signs flickered and died, yet the road refused to die completely. Local residents fought to preserve the remaining sections. In the 1990s, states began to designate portions of the old road as historic routes. Signs went up marking historic Route 66. Preservationists like Bob Waldmeyer, Michael Wallis, and others wrote books, created maps, and gave talks. The road became a symbol of nostalgia, a way to reconnect with a simpler time, and it worked. International tourists began to arrive, eager to experience the America they had seen in movies and heard in songs. They drove rental cars, following the old alignments, stopping at every souvenir shop and every diner. The road also found new life in film and television. In 1960, the television show Route 66 premiered. It followed two young men driving a Corvette across America, having adventures and meeting people. The show was a hit. It romanticized the road and the spirit of wanderlust. It showed America as a vast, beautiful, and mysterious landscape. The show helped cement Route 66 in the American consciousness. Today, the road continues to evolve. Some sections are paved and well-maintained. Others are gravel or dirt. Some have been completely obliterated by interstates or sprawl, but the spirit of the road lives on in the people who travel it. They come for the history, the beauty, the sense of discovery. They come to find themselves or to lose themselves or to simply enjoy the journey. They come because the road that helped build the American dream still has something to teach us. That lesson is simple but profound. The American dream is not a static goal. It is a process. It is the act of moving forward, even when the road is rough. It is the willingness to take a chance, to leave behind the familiar, to embrace the unknown. Route 66 was built on that willingness. It was paved by workers who labored in the sun, by entrepreneurs who risked their savings, by travelers who packed up their lives and drove. The road is a monument to human determination. And as long as there are people who believe in the possibility of a better tomorrow, the road will never truly die. Now let us travel a bit further west to the Mojave Desert. Here, the road runs straight for miles, through a landscape of sand and scrub. The heat shimmers on the asphalt. The silence is immense. This is where the road feels both lonely and liberating. In the town of Amboy, California, there is a landmark called Roy's Motel and Cafe. It has a giant neon sign that spells out Roy's in red and green. The motel is abandoned, the cafe closed, but the sign still glows at night, a beacon in the emptiness. Roy's is a ghost of the golden age, a reminder of what was. Travelers stop to take photos, to imagine the families who once stopped there for a burger and a cold drink. Roy's is a piece of the past, but it still stands. It still says something about the road. It says that even in abandonment, there is beauty. Further west still, we reach the end of the road. The official western terminus of Route 66 is at the intersection of Santa Monica Boulevard and Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica, California. There, a sign marks the end of the trail. Beyond it lies the Pacific Ocean, endless and blue. This is where the dream meets the horizon. This is where the weary traveler stops and looks out at the water. What did they feel? Relief, satisfaction, perhaps a little sadness that the journey was over, but the journey never truly ends. The road continues in memory, in story, in the next family that packs their bags and heads out. We have traveled from Chicago to Santa Monica, from the shores of Lake Michigan to the shores of the Pacific. We have met the people who built the road, who wrote it, who preserved it. We have seen the highs and the lows, the beauty and the brokenness. The road that helped build the American dream is not a perfect road. It is a human road, and that is its greatest strength. Now we must consider what the road means for us today. In an age of flight, of fast trains, of virtual connections, why do we still care about a two-lane highway that was decommissioned decades ago? Because the road represents something fundamental. It represents the desire to move, to grow, to change. It represents the belief that the future is not fixed, that we can choose our own path. Route 66 is a metaphor for the American spirit. It is a reminder that we are all travelers, that we are all on a journey, and that the journey itself is the destination. There is a place near the end of the road in Los Angeles called the L.A. County Courthouse, where the original terminus marker once stood. It is gone now, but the memory remains. Every year, people gather to celebrate the road. They hold car shows, swap meets, and festivals. They share stories. They pass the torch to a new generation. The road lives on in these gatherings, in the laughter, in the engines revving, in the neon lights that have been restored. And so, we continue. The road that helped build the American dream is still being built. It is built by the mechanic who fixes a classic car, by the historian who documents a forgotten diner, by the family who drives the road for the first time. It is built by every person who believes that the journey matters. The American dream is not a house with a white picket fence. It is not a bank account. It is the act of moving forward, of hoping, of trying. It is the road itself. As we drive, let us remember the people who came before us. Let us honor their struggles and their triumphs. Let us carry their stories with us, and let us never forget that the road is always open, always waiting, always ready to take us somewhere new. This is the story of Route 66. This is the story of the road that helped build the American dream. And the journey continues, mile after mile, generation after generation, as long as there are dreams to chase and roads to travel. There is a quiet stretch of Route 66 in western Oklahoma, near the town of Elk City, where the old concrete still shows the tire marks of generations. You can stand there and feel the heat rising off the pavement, hear the wind whispering through the tall grass. The road here is not much wider than a driveway, and it curves gently through farmland that has not changed much in 100 years. This is where the road feels most alive, not as a relic but as a living artery. The farmers who work the surrounding fields remember when trucks loaded with produce and livestock rumbled past at all hours. They remember when the road was the only connection to the outside world. Now the trucks use the interstate, but the old road remains, a quiet monument to the daily rhythms of a bygone era. In the small town of Eric, Oklahoma, there is a place called the Sandhills Curiosity Shop. It is run by a man named Harley Russell, who calls himself the ambassador of Route 66. Harley is a storyteller, a musician, and a keeper of the flame. He plays guitar and sings songs about the road, about the people he has met, about the beauty of the journey. His shop is a museum of oddities, old gas pumps, license plates from every state, vintage signs, and photographs of travelers who have passed through. Harley greets every visitor with a smile and a handshake. He asks where they are from and where they are going. He tells them stories of the road, of the diners that once served the best pie in the county, of the motels that offered a clean bed for $1.50. Harley understands that the road is not just a path but a community. It connects people who would never otherwise meet. It creates bonds that last a lifetime. Further west in Tucumcari, New Mexico, the neon signs still glow at night. The Blue Swallow Motel is one of the most famous stops on the entire route. It opened in 1940 and has been lovingly restored by its owners, Kevin and Nancy Mueller. The sign is a giant blue swallow, wings spread, illuminated in blue and white. The motel has a vintage charm that cannot be faked. Each room has a carport, so you can park your car right outside your door. The owners know the history of every tile, every piece of furniture. They tell you about the families who stayed there during the Dust Bowl, the soldiers who passed through during World War II, the honeymooners who started their lives together in room number 7. The Blue Swallow is not just a place to sleep. It is a place to feel the spirit of the road, to connect with the past, to understand that the American dream was built on the back of small businesses like this one. The road also has a darker side, one that must be acknowledged. For African American travelers, Route 66 was not always a dream. During the segregation era, many motels, restaurants, and gas stations refused service to black motorists. Travel could be dangerous, humiliating, and exhausting. African American families had to plan their trips carefully, relying on guidebooks like the Negro Motorist Green Book, which listed safe places to eat, sleep, and buy gas. These travelers faced discrimination and hostility, yet they persisted. They drove the road because they, too, believed in the promise of a better life. They were part of the migration westward, seeking jobs, freedom, and dignity. Their stories are an essential part of Route 66 history, a reminder that the American dream has not always been equally available, but that the struggle for equality is also part of the road. In the 192s and 30s, black-owned businesses along Route 66 served as havens. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Black Wall Street district was a thriving economic center before the 1921 race massacre destroyed it. But the road itself became a pathway for the Great Migration, as African Americans moved from the rural South to urban centers in the North and West. Route 66 was one of the main arteries of that migration. Families packed their belongings into cars and trucks and drove toward California, toward hope. The road carried them through towns where they were not welcome, but it also carried them to places where they could build new lives. Today, there are efforts to document and commemorate the African American experience on Route 66. Museums, exhibits, and oral histories are preserving these stories so that future generations will know the full truth of the road. the road also has a place in the history of labor and the working class. The men and women who built Route 66 were often itinerant workers, traveling from job to job, living in temporary camps. They worked with picks and shovels under the relentless sun for wages that barely kept their families alive. They were immigrants, veterans, farmers displaced by the Dust Bowl. They were black and white and brown. They built the road with their hands, and they built it well. Some sections of the original concrete are still in use today, more than 90 years later. That is a testament to the skill and pride of those workers. They are the unsung heroes of the American dream, the ones who literally paved the way for others. As we move further into the California desert, we encounter the ghost towns that the interstate left behind. One such place is Amba, which we mentioned earlier. But there is also Baghdad, California, which is now completely abandoned. Baghdad was once a thriving stop on Route 66, with a school, a post office, and several businesses. When the interstate bypassed it, the town died, the buildings crumbled, the people left. Today, only a few concrete foundations and a faded sign remain. Baghdad is a cautionary tale, a reminder that progress can be cruel, but it is also a testament to the fragility of the American dream. The dream is not guaranteed. It requires constant effort, constant investment, constant care. When the road was taken away, the dream for Baghdad vanished. Yet even in abandonment, there is resilience. In the town of Oatman, Arizona, the road still runs through the center of town, and wild burros roam the streets. Oatman was a mining town that boomed in the early 1900s and then faded. But when Route 66 brought tourists, the town revived. Today, it is a living museum. Shopkeepers dress in period costumes. Gunfights are reenacted on the main street. The burros, descendants of pack animals used by miners, wander freely, begging for carrots from visitors. Oatman is a testament to the road's power to give life to places that would otherwise be forgotten. It is a reminder that the American dream is not just about getting rich or famous. It is about finding a way to survive, to adapt, to keep going. The road has also inspired art and literature beyond the famous song and television show. John Steinbeck called Route 66 the Mother Road in his novel The Grapes of Wrath, which told the story of the Joad family Dust Bowl refugees traveling from Oklahoma to California. The book captured the desperation and hope of the migrants. It showed the road as a symbol of both suffering and possibility. The Joads faced hunger, death, and exploitation, but they kept moving. They kept believing that something better awaited them. That is the heart of the American dream, the belief that no matter how hard things get, you can keep going, you can find a new beginning. In the 1990s, the photographer and writer Michael Wallis published Route 66, The Mother Road, a book that became a Bible for road enthusiasts. Wallis traveled the entire route, documenting the people and places that made it special. His book helped spark the preservation movement. It inspired people to see the road not just as a highway, but as a living history. Wallis wrote about the diner owners, the motel operators, the gas station attendants, the artists, the dreamers. He showed that the road was built by individuals, not corporations. It was a grassroots phenomenon, a collection of small dreams that together created something monumental. The road also found its way into music beyond the famous Nat King Cole song. Woody Guthrie, the folk singer, traveled Route 66 and wrote songs about the Dust Bowl migrants. He sang about the hard times and the hope, about the beauty of the land and the strength of the people. Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, and countless others have referenced the road in their lyrics. The road became a metaphor for freedom, for escape, for the open-ended possibilities of America. In the 1970s, the rock band The Eagles sang about life in the fast lane, but they also sang about the desert and the highway. The road is woven into the fabric of American music, a constant reminder that we are always moving, always searching. In recent years, there has been a resurgence of interest in Route 66. International tourists, especially from Europe and Asia, come to America specifically to drive the old road. They rent classic cars or RVs and spend weeks traveling from Chicago to Santa Monica. They are fascinated by the nostalgia, the sense of a lost America. They stop at every souvenir shop, every quirky attraction, every diner that still serves a real hamburger and a milkshake. They take pictures of abandoned gas stations and rusting signs. They are not just tourists, they are pilgrims. They are seeking an experience that cannot be found in an airport or a chain hotel. They are seeking the road itself. Domestic travelers are also rediscovering Route 66. Families, retirees, solo adventurers, and motorcycle clubs are hitting the road in growing numbers. Social media has played a role. Pictures of neon signs, vintage cars, and sunsets over the desert are shared thousands of times. The road has become a symbol of slow travel, of taking the time to see the country, of connecting with history and nature. It is an antidote to the frantic pace of modern life. On Route 66, you cannot rush. The road twists and turns. It takes you through small towns where the speed limit is 25 miles per hour. It forces you to slow down, to look around, to notice the world. The road also teaches us about the environment. Much of Route 66 passes through fragile desert and prairie ecosystems. In the 193's rows, the Dust Bowl was a catastrophe caused by poor farming practices and drought, but the road itself contributed to the damage by opening up previously inaccessible areas. Today, there is a growing awareness of the need to preserve the natural landscape along the route. Efforts are underway to protect the desert tortoise, the prairie dog, the cactus, and wildflowers. Travelers are encouraged to stay on designated roads, to pack out their trash, to respect the land. The American dream must include stewardship of the earth that sustains us. As we approach the end of our journey, let us consider the road's legacy for future generations. Children today may never drive a car, may never experience the freedom of a two-lane highway, but they can still learn the values that Route 66 represents: curiosity, resilience, community, hope. They can learn about the people who built the road, who traveled it, who fought to preserve it. They can understand that the American dream is not about possessions or status, but about the courage to move forward, to take risks, to believe in the possibility of a better tomorrow. The road that helped build the American dream is not a single road. It is a network of dreams, a tapestry of stories. It is the mechanic in Shamrock, Texas, who still pumps gas and gives directions. It is the waitress in the diner who remembers your order from last year. It is the farmer who waves as you drive past his field. It is the family in the old station wagon, the couple on a motorcycle, the solo traveler in a compact car. They are all part of the road. They are all part of the dream, so let us continue to drive, even if only in our imaginations. Let us feel the wind, smell the sage, hear the hum of the tires on the asphalt. Let us remember that the road is always there, waiting for us, ready to take us to a place we have never been. The American dream is not a destination. It is the journey itself, and the journey never ends, and the journey never ends. For every traveler who has ever felt the hum of the asphalt beneath their tires, the road becomes a part of them. It seeps into the bones, into the memory, into the dreams that wake them in the night. There is a reason why people who have driven Route 66 speak of it with a kind of reverence, as though they have touched something sacred. They have. They have touched the raw, unvarnished heart of a country that is always becoming, always reinventing itself. And even as the original highway crumbles in sections, even as the neon signs flicker and fade, the road persists in the stories we tell, in the photographs we share, in the maps we unfold with a mix of nostalgia and hope. Consider the family from Munich who saved for 2 years to rent a convertible and drive from Chicago to Santa Monica. They had seen the road in movies, read about it in magazines, heard the song on the radio, but nothing prepared them for the actual experience. The father, a mechanical engineer, told a reporter at a diner in Tucumcari that he felt like he had stepped into a time machine. The mother, a schoolteacher, said she wanted her children to understand that America was not just skyscrapers and shopping malls, but also wide open spaces and small towns where people still waved at strangers. Their teenage daughter, who had been glued to her phone for most of the flight over, found herself looking up from the screen to watch the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. She started a journal. She drew the cracked signs in the wild burrows. She wrote about the taste of a real milkshake and the smell of creosote after rain. The road changed her, as it changes everyone who gives themselves to it. Then there is the retired couple from Ohio who sold their house and bought an RV. They had planned to travel the country for a year, but they ended up spending 3 months on Route 66 alone. They told a park ranger in Arizona that they had never felt so alive. Every day brought a new discovery, a new conversation, a new piece of history. They learned about the Red Cedar Inn in Pacific, Missouri, a log cabin-style building that housed a restaurant famous for its fried chicken. They visited the blue whale in Catoosa, Oklahoma, a massive concrete whale in a pond that was built as a birthday gift for a daughter. They stayed at El Rancho Hotel in Gallup, New Mexico, where movie stars like John Wayne and Ronald Reagan once slept. They walked the wooden sidewalks of Oatman and fed the burros. They stood at the edge of the Mojave Desert and felt the wind that had blown across 1,000 miles. They were not just tourists, they were pilgrims. And when they finally reached the Santa Monica Pier, they did not feel an ending. They felt a beginning. The road also draws the young and the restless. college students on spring break, backpackers with little more than a tent and a thumb, artists seeking inspiration, musicians looking for a place to play. I met a guitarist in a motel courtyard in Tucumcari who had hitchhiked from New York. He played a song he had written about a waitress in a diner who had given him a free meal when he had no money. The song was raw and honest, and it spoke of the kindness of strangers, the generosity that still exists along the old road. He told me he was headed to California to try his luck, but he was in no hurry. He said the road was his teacher, and he was learning to be patient, to trust, to listen. That is the gift of the road. It strips away the noise and reminds us what matters. The preservation movement has grown into a passionate community. Volunteers spend weekends painting over graffiti on old signs, clearing brush from abandoned gas stations, repairing historic buildings. They organize car shows and festivals, raise money for museums, create digital archives of photographs and interviews. They are not just saving concrete and neon, they are saving stories. In Galena, Kansas, a group of locals restored the Brush Creek Bridge, a stone arch bridge built in 1939 that carried Route 66 traffic. They held a ceremony and invited anyone who had ever crossed it to share their memories. An elderly woman remembered her father driving her to school in a Model T. A man recalled proposing to his wife on the bridge at sunset. The bridge became a symbol of connection, a link between past and present, yet the road is not frozen in time. It evolves. New businesses open in old buildings. Artists turn abandoned motels into galleries. Farmers sell homemade pies at stands along the shoulder. In Seligman, Arizona, the town that inspired the animated movie Cars, the road is lined with souvenir shops and restaurants that cater to the steady stream of visitors. The owner of the Snowcap Drive-In, a legendary spot known for its quirky decor and humor, still greets customers with a wink and a joke. He told me that the road is alive because people keep coming, keep laughing, keep eating his famous cheeseburgers. He said the road does not need saving, it needs loving, and love is what it gets. There is a romance to Route 66 that persists despite the potholes and the boarded-up windows. It is the romance of the open road, of freedom, of the possibility that around the next bend you will find something unexpected. A ghost town, a cactus forest, a diner with the best pie in the world. That romance is what drew writers and filmmakers long before the road became a tourist attraction. It is what inspired Jack Kerouac to write on the road, though his journeys took many highways, not just one. But the spirit is the same, the desire to move, to explore, to find yourself in the immensity of the American landscape. The road also teaches us about loss. Every preserved building is a reminder of something that was almost erased. The demolition of the Miami Motel in Galena, the decay of the Roy's Motel and Cafe in Amboy, the disappearance of the Twin Arrows trading post near Flagstaff. These are not just architectural losses, they are the erasure of memories, of lives lived, of dreams pursued. But even in ruin they speak. The rusted pumps, the faded murals, the cracked windows tell stories of ambition and disappointment, of boom and bust. They are the silent witnesses to the American dream in all its glory and fragility. If the road is a teacher, what does it teach us now, in an age of instant gratification and digital navigation? It teaches us that the journey matters more than the destination. It teaches us that a two-lane highway can be more valuable than a superhighway because it forces us to pay attention. It teaches us that small towns have dignity and that the people who run the family diners and the mom-and-pop motels are the backbone of the country. It teaches us that history is not a museum exhibit. It is a living thread that connects us to those who came before. We see this lesson in the eyes of a young couple from Illinois who traveled the entire road on bicycles. They had no support vehicle, no credit cards, only their legs and their will. They camped in fields and stayed with strangers they met along the way. They told me that the hardest part was not the hills or the heat, but the loneliness. Yet every time they felt like giving up, someone would stop and offer water or a ride or a place to sleep. They said the road taught them that humanity is fundamentally kind. That lesson is worth more than any degree or bank account. The road also teaches us about change. The American dream is not static. It shifts with each generation. For the Dust Bowl migrants, the dream was survival and a chance to start over. For the families in the 1950s taking cross-country vacations, it was prosperity and leisure. For the baby boomers who hit the road in the 60s, it was freedom and rebellion. For the travelers today, it can be a quest for authenticity, a break from the virtual world, a desire to connect with something real. The road adapts and so does the dream, but the core remains, the belief that movement is possible, that where you come from does not determine where you are going, that the open space ahead of you is full of promise. That is the American dream that Route 66 helped build. It is a dream that has been battered by recessions and wars, by natural disasters and social upheaval, but it has never died. It lives in the neon of a restored sign, in the taste of a root beer float at a soda fountain, in the sound of a big engine rumbling through a quiet town. As we come to the end of this episode, I ask you to think about your own road. It may not be Route 66. It may be a country lane, a city street, a path through the woods, but every road carries the same potential to lead you somewhere new, to show you something you have not seen, to remind you that you are not stuck. The American dream is not a promise, it is an invitation. It invites you to get in the car, to put the key in the ignition, to roll down the window and feel the wind on your face. It invites you to travel, not just across the country, but across your own limitations. So thank you for traveling with me on this journey. We have covered 2,448 miles from Chicago to Santa Monica, but we have also traveled through time, through joy and sorrow, through the lives of ordinary people who did extraordinary things. The road that helped build the American dream is still here, waiting for you. It is a ribbon of asphalt that stretches across the heart of a nation, but it is also a thread that ties us to one another. And the journey never ends, it only changes. The neon may dim, the diners may close, but the road goes on in the stories we tell, in the dreams we chase, in the hope that tomorrow will be better than today. And that above all is the American dream. And that above all is the American dream. But the road does not end there. It continues to unfold, to reveal itself to those who are willing to slow down and look. I think of a man I met in a small town in Texas, a place called Shamrock. He was standing outside the U-Drop Inn, a magnificent Art Deco building that once served as a gas station and cafe. He told me he had driven cross-country dozens of times, but had never stopped there before. This time he pulled over because he saw the iconic tower from the highway and felt a pull. He walked inside and found a museum filled with memorabilia from the golden age of travel. He spent 2 hours reading letters written by travelers in the 30s, looking at photographs of families posing in front of their cars, listening to recordings of oral histories from people who had worked on the road. He said he felt like he had stepped into a time machine. He was a truck driver by profession, hauling goods across the interstate system, but he had never truly experienced the road until that moment. He said, "I thought I knew America, but I was just passing through. Now I understand that the road is a place, not just a route." That is a lesson many of us need to learn. We are so focused on getting somewhere that we forget to be somewhere. Route 66 forces you to be present. It rewards the curious, the patient, the ones who are willing to stop and listen to the wind. In that same town, I met a woman who had inherited a keychain collection from her grandmother. Each keychain was from a different motel or gas station along Route 66. She had never traveled the road herself, but she had grown up hearing stories about the places behind those tiny souvenirs. Her grandmother had worked as a waitress at a diner in Clinton, Oklahoma, and had saved every trinket she could. The woman decided to recreate her grandmother's journey. She drove the entire route, stopping at every location where her grandmother had worked or stayed. She told me that the most powerful moment came in Joplin, Missouri, at a motel that had been converted into low-income housing. She found the room number from an old postcard and stood outside, imagining her grandmother at 19, newly married, dreaming of a better life. She said she finally understood that the American dream is not a single destination, but a series of small, brave steps. Her grandmother had taken those steps, and now she was walking in the same footprints. The road also teaches us about resilience in the face of loss. In the aftermath of the 2021 wildfires that swept through parts of California and Arizona, many historic sites along Route 66 were threatened. In the town of Needles, the iconic El Garces Hotel, a Harvey house built in 1908, survived the flames, but the surrounding landscape was scarred. Volunteers rushed to protect the building, wetting down the roof, clearing brush. They saved it. When I visited a year later, the manager told me that the fire had brought the community together. People who had never spoken before became friends. They realized that the road was not just a collection of buildings, but a shared inheritance. The fire had threatened to erase a piece of their history, and they had refused to let it go. That refusal, that stubborn love, is what keeps the road alive. And yet, for all the preservation efforts, there is a melancholy that clings to the road. You feel it in the silence of a deserted stretch in the Texas Panhandle, where the only sound is the wind rattling a sign that has not been read in decades. You feel it in the faded paint of a mural in Tucumcari that once advertised a motel with a swimming pool and air conditioning. The pool is empty now. The air conditioning is gone, but the mural still shows a woman in a swimsuit, her smile frozen in time. She represents an optimism that seems naive today, but it is also profoundly moving. Those people believed in the future. They believed that the road would bring prosperity, that the next traveler would stop and spend $1, that the dream would never end. For some, it did end. For others, it transformed. I recall a conversation with an elderly man in Vinita, Oklahoma, who had owned a gas station on the road for 40 years. He closed it in the late 90s when traffic dwindled. But he never left. He lives in the house next door, and every morning he walks over to the station and sits on a bench out front. He told me that he still greets the cars that pass, even though they rarely stop. He knows their license plates, he says, and he can tell stories about every state. He said he does not feel sad. He feels grateful. He had a front row seat to the American dream. He saw families driving west with everything they owned. He saw young couples on their honeymoon. He saw soldiers coming home from war. He saw joy and sorrow, hope and despair. And through it all, he said, the road kept moving. That is the secret. The road does not stop for anyone. It just keeps going, and so must we. As we come to the final miles of this journey, I think about the moments that stay with you. The taste of a cherry limeade at a drive-in in Oklahoma. The sight of a double rainbow over the painted desert. The sound of a train whistle echoing across the plains at night. The road gives you these gifts freely if you are open to them. It asks nothing in return except your attention, and in that attention, you find yourself. You find the thread that connects you to every traveler who has gone before, to every dream that was chased and every dream that was realized. So the road that helped build the American dream is not a museum piece. It is a living artery, still pumping life into the heart of the country. It is a reminder that the dream is not a finished product. It is a process, a constant becoming. Each of us adds a layer to it every time we turn the key, every time we choose the old road over the new, every time we stop to help a stranger or listen to a story. The dream is built not by presidents or corporations, but by ordinary people with extraordinary hope. And as long as there is a road, there is a way forward. Thank you for walking with me on this stretch of history. The neon may flicker, the concrete may crack, but the spirit of the road endures. It waits for you at the intersection of memory and possibility, just beyond the city limits where the pavement narrows and the sky opens wide. Go find it. The road is calling, and the dream is still out there, waiting to be built, 1 mile at a time.